Today's scripture is all about forgiveness. And right off the hop, we get into Peter asking Jesus, "How many times should I forgive?" In the Torah, in the Hebrew expectations of the day, the expectation was 3 times. 4 times, too bad. You're on your own if you can't change your behavior. So Peter was being kind of generous, double that plus a little bit more. 7 is the perfect number. It's the ideal number. It's the number of God. And Jesus said, no, even 70 times 7. There's a cartoon that goes around on social media every now and again that has Peter and Jesus talking. And Jesus gives us this answer. And Peter just shakes his head and he said, oh, now I have to do math too? It's not about math. Whether you're reading a translation that says it's 77 or a translation that says it's 490, depending on whether you look at it 7 plus 7 or 7 times 7, it's not math. It's the fact that the number was ridiculously huge. We're talking about people who were paid 1 denarii a day. Like their number usage was small. Not like us, where it's nothing for us to spend $500 on something without even blinking. Not our reality. So for them, a number close to 500 was an astronomical, outrageous number. And that's kind of one of the themes of Jesus' parables. They're always outrageous. They're never what you think. They're always kind of, oh my heavens, did he just say what I think he just said? Let me think about that a little bit more. This is no different. Peter is trying to understand. Remember, he's the one that thinks he gets it, and then he says something and realizes he doesn't have it at all. He doesn't understand what's going on. So we're talking about forgiveness. And forgiveness specifically. There is nowhere in the Bible where it says forgive and forget. That's actually Shakespeare. And I think one of these days I need to do an entire video on the difference between what's in Shakespeare and what's in the Bible, but that's another time. Forgiveness was never part of forgetting. In fact, the main Hebrew verb was zakar, which means I remember or to remember. So Jesus never said forget, but he did say forgive. To a ridiculous amount of times, always be the one that forgives and be part of that transformational life. And it might not be transformational for the person you forgive, but it is transformational for the person who offers forgiveness. How many times, each of us, we've all had plenty of opportunities, have we been in a situation where we just want to hold on to that anger because it's familiar, because it gives us energy, it gives depth to our feelings? But that's not what Jesus asked us to do. Jesus says, forgive, let it go. Just let it march on. Do not think about it anymore. Do not have it control you and contain you, because ultimately that's what anger does. Don't go that route. And then he tells a parable, and always Jesus' teachings in parables are always so multi-leveled. He talks about a rich person who has loaned an infinitesimal amount to one of his slaves. Again, here's the hyperbole, the exaggeration, the oh heavens, no, that's never going to happen kind of point in the story. He gives it to someone who's a slave, someone who doesn't have any real income. And he says, you have to pay me back what you owe. And this slave weeps and wails and throws himself on the mercy of the Lord. And the owner is touched, the master is touched, and he said, okay, you know what? I understand. You're going to do your best, and we'll just let it go. And this is where the parable really starts. That slave turns to another slave. In the hierarchy of slaves, he looks to someone less than him, who again borrowed a lot of money. Slaves don't get paid, so there's no way money can get repaid out of their salary. So the first slave turns to the second slave and says, give me your money now. Don't want to hear about it. Pay me back. And the second slave does exactly the same thing that the first slave does. But the first slave doesn't forgive. He doesn't acknowledge generosity. He doesn't want to dismiss what's going on. He is greedy and he is controlled by his anger, and he wants what he wants now. And somehow the master hears about this, calls him in and says, "How dare you? I forgave you. I gave you space. I gave you time. And this is how you repay it?" Don't think that you're getting off easy this time. It was a one strike, you were out. And then the master continues to tell him, "I'm selling your family. I'm selling you. I'm doing whatever I can to point out the fact that you owe me money and you could not be generous with someone who owed something to you." The punchline is always be better about how you treat people. Don't drive them into poverty. Don't obsess over what you think you get back. Forgive people. Let it go. There's a saying out there, never lend money that you can't afford to replace. Now, in harder economic times, that's a little bit challenging, especially when you've got friends going through hard things. But money is everywhere. Money we can replace. Relationship we can't. I was just talking with a friend of mine today who was having an awful experience with someone who just went absolutely berserk with her attitudes in an environment where it was not acceptable at all. She called me because she needed to have some kind of balance, some kind of off-putting, get her back on her feet again. And so I reminded her, this is a woman she has to forgive. And of course my friend didn't want to right away. I said, look, you've got to let it go. You cannot have her taking up real estate in your head. You've got to let it go. Forget about it. Put up your boundaries, but move on. Within the hour, she had a few other people who had witnessed the altercation come to her support. I'm not saying A leads to B necessarily, but when we forgive people, when we open that door to generosity, we will get support. We will get recognized. We will get confirmation that that is the right thing to do. It could take a myriad of ways. That just happened to be what my friend experienced today. Forgiveness is not easy. And sometimes we have to do it again and again and again. Jesus knew what he was talking about. It's not that 7 people commit one sin and then you have to forgive them. It's that one person will commit a sin over and over and over again. They might not want to change. They might think they've got nothing to change. But you have to constantly forgive them, because every time you're confronted, every time you witness that sin against you, and remember, in the Hebrew culture, there's only 2 types of sins: the sins against people and the sins against God. And of the 2, the sins against people is the more important one. There's someone I know who I will never work with again, who bullied me horribly, and all these wonderful, loving people watched her do it and didn't say a word. I have to forgive that over and over and over again. Now, not to forget, I won't forget that situation. I will never work with this person again. I might actually really struggle with working with the people who just stood by and watched. But I'm not carrying her or her anger or her misplaced judgment. I've let that go. And I'll have to let it go again the next time I encounter her, and again after that. Forgiveness is a lifestyle. It's a process. It is not a one and done. It is something we're continuously asked to do. The fact that Jesus is talking in 7 times 7 is perfection on top of perfection. Humans are creatures who will fail. That's just how we are. And we have the grace of God to give that grace of forgiveness to someone else. We don't have to forget. We don't have to be a doormat. We don't have to pretend like it didn't happen. We don't have to keep our story to ourselves and not tell people what has happened to bring us to this place. None of it is asking us to be silent, but all of it is asking us to make a choice, to live in the light, to live without that awful feeling of anger and disgust and disturbance. We forgive because we don't want to carry it anymore. We forgive because we want to be living in the light, in a godly world where we're following Jesus' example. We forgive because we need to let go of all of that garbage. We can't carry it with us. In a lifetime, we'll just accumulate way too much. And if you've ever seen a bitter person, you know they're still carrying all of the times they should have offered forgiveness. So 70 times 7. Every day if you need to, every hour if it comes to that. Offer forgiveness. Let it go. Don't have that controlling you. Don't give up that real estate in your mind or your heart. Look for something better, because forgiveness leads to newness. And Jesus wants us to be on that path where everything is possible and nothing is holding us back from entering the community that he has described and arranged for us. Forgive. 70 times 7. Keep it going.